Good afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. Before we kick things off, please ensure all your devices have been switched to silent. And just remember that all sessions today are being recorded, so will be available post-summit. Welcome to this session on the human side of cybersecurity, building a culture of security with AWS and CBA. Please join me in welcoming Harvey from Commonwealth Bank of Australia and Mitch from AWS.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks, everybody. I hope you've managed to get some lunch. Now, picture this. Your organization is growing fast. Your development teams are building features faster than ever, and they want to ship those features just as fast as they're building them, but they're running into some challenges because every single one of these new features has to go through an important security review process. Now, as that development team continues to expand, the security team, who are the team that are typically responsible for carrying out those review processes, aren't able to grow as quickly as the development teams are. And in fact, some research that was published by the ISC² organization highlights that there is a 3.4 million people, professional shortage in the cybersecurity industry. So you can see that the maths on this just don't add up right now. There is a ratio disparity between software engineers and security professionals. How many security professionals do we have in the room here? Excellent. You're in high demand. Ask for a pay rise. But the problem with these delays, as these processes, which are very important, start to become delays within an organization, the teams start to get issues with processes coming through, the software coming through. They start to provide feedback, excuse me. So these bottlenecks start to appear, and the organizations start to feel that security is becoming a blocker because the software engineers are getting dissatisfied by the delays. The cybersecurity team are getting overwhelmed by the incoming load of requests that are coming through. So the business starts to view cybersecurity as a blocker for the organization, and that's not where we want this situation to be. So what if we could fundamentally change this dynamic? What if, instead of having security considered at the end of the process, we could have it considered throughout the whole life cycle of the software development life cycle? What if we could ensure that software decisions are being made throughout that development life cycle instead of at the end of it? And what if we could take that ratio disparity where we have a shortage of security engineers and an abundance of developers and turn it on its head and leverage those developers and train and enable those developers so that they can become security champions and advocates within our software and product teams to help ensure that the security decisions are being made earlier, more often and more frequently through that software development life cycle. Now, my name's Mitch Beaumont, as you've already heard. I'm a solutions architect from AWS, and it's my pleasure to be joined here on stage today, later, should I say, by Harvey Deek, the CIO for Group Security at Commonwealth Bank of Australia. And over the next 20 or so minutes, we're going to share with you how both of our organizations have taken to solving that problem at scale across those organizations. You're going to hear me talk about culture of security a few times today, and I just want to draw a differentiation between these two terms, culture of security versus security culture. At AWS and Amazon, when we talk about culture of security, what we're talking about is that security mindset that permeates the entire organization versus security culture, which we think of as the culture within the security team itself. Now, and the ways of working, if you will. Both of these are very important topics, but we're going to focus primarily on culture of security today. Now, we've identified three key ingredients in the culture of security if you're an organization that's looking to build a strong culture of security. And it starts with strong executive support. At AWS, for example, and Amazon, our leaders, Andy Jassy and Matt Garman, remind us and our customers on a regular basis that security is our #1 priority. You may have heard of it referred to as Job Zero before. The next important ingredient is psychological safety. And what we mean by that is that an organization that nurtures a safe environment where people feel empowered to report security concerns. Whether you've fallen victim to a phishing attempt or you've identified a security issue, you feel confident and comfortable in your ability to be able to report those issues. That includes fostering a no-blame culture, normalizing the process of escalation, and using positive and inclusive language around security and not scary and intimidating language around security. And then the final ingredient is distributed ownership, and that's what we're going to primarily talk about today. So what do I mean by distributed ownership? Well, I mean essentially the organization understanding that security is everyone's job. Everyone in the organization plays a part in the organization delivering security outcomes. Ownership is a really important part of that, as alluded to by my previous slides. Ownership at Amazon is a particularly important word because it's one of our 16 leadership principles. It is part of our hiring process. We spend a lot of time trying to find individuals that demonstrate these ownership behaviors when we're interviewing them. And we want to make sure that our service teams apply that ownership because we give them cradle to grave ownership of the products and services that they are building. That also includes ownership of security within those products and services. And I'm talking about true ownership here, not just delegated responsibility. So you might be wondering, right, Mitch, is the only thing I have to do is tell my product and service teams and developers you're now responsible for security. Well, no, it's not that simple. Our lessons and our experiences have told us that it doesn't work because in that scenario, we're relying on good intentions. And everyone in our organization has good intentions for the most part. But we can't rely on good intentions because they don't scale. This quote by Jeff Bezos is really great. I love referring to it because it explains why good intentions don't work when we're trying to drive large-scale organizational changes. So if we were trying to drive this change of distributed security ownership and we can't use good intentions, what can we use? Well, mechanisms is the thing that we use at Amazon to solve this problem. What do I mean by a mechanism? Well, a mechanism in our language, in our organization, is a complete process or a virtuous cycle. One that takes a series of inputs and turns them into a series of outputs or a single output that solves a business problem for us. And we think about mechanisms at Amazon as having three core components. The first component is the tools. These are the things that turn the inputs into the outputs that solve that large-scale business problem. The next component is the adoption component. These are the skills and the tactics that we use to drive adoption of those tools to convert the inputs to outputs. And then we've got the inspection component. These are the methods that we use to analyze and inspect, measure the adoption of those tools, and measure the overall result of the mechanism that we've built. Now, in order to distribute security ownership across our organization, we built a mechanism that we call the Security Guardians. Has anyone heard of the Security Guardians in the AWS context before? Okay, cool. So the Security Guardians is a mechanism at AWS wherein we embed security expertise in our product teams. These are software developers in our product teams, and they act as ambassadors for security within those product teams, and they make sure that security considerations are made early and often and throughout the software development lifecycle. They also play a really important part of linking that team back into our central security function. They provide feedback, they share lessons learned, and they're constantly helping the security organization reiterate and re-improve on that Security Guardians mechanism, so they feel like they're contributing back to our organization's growth and improvement. Now, I talked about a mechanism solving organizational problems, and you can see from the numbers on the screen right now, Guardians for us has helped solve some of our problems. For example, teams that have Guardians in them have achieved 20% faster security reviews, and they've found 22% fewer findings when it's come to do that final security review. Now, I'm under no illusion that these kinds of organizational changes and the results, they don't happen overnight. They take long-term investment. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that this is something you can go and do tonight, have it done tomorrow. There are some steps, and you can see a few examples on there. If building a champion-style program is something that you're interested in doing, following these steps is something you should consider, and it'll definitely help you get started. But it is a journey, it takes a while. One important step that I missed on there, though, and I think it deserves its own slide, is that it's really important to start by understanding the problem you're trying to solve first, and that's regardless of whether this is a security-related challenge or other organizational-related challenge. Deeply understanding that problem is super important. This is a quote from Einstein that I really love to reference as well, and it highlights the importance of spending time thinking deeply about the problem you're trying to solve before trying to come up with a solution. For example, it might be that you're trying to solve a problem of software release velocity. What's causing that release velocity issue? Is it bottlenecks in some downstream process? Are those bottlenecks being caused by a technology, a tool, or some other related process? But the key here is to deeply understand what's going on, what's the problem you're trying to solve, because it's going to make sure, or it's going to provide more assurances that the solution you're building is going to be helping solve the problem, or is geared towards solving the right kind of problem. Now, We've been talking publicly about this mechanism for a couple of years, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to contribute to some public blog posts on the Security Guardians program and how organizations can actually build their own Security Guardians program as well. And if you want to click those QR codes, they should take you over to those 2 blog posts right now. But in addition to writing blog posts, I've also had the opportunity to go and speak to customers around the world about our culture of security and about our Guardians program. And one of the common pieces of feedback that I get from those customers is, well, look, Mitch, AWS and Amazon is very different to my company. It's bigger, it operates differently, hires different kinds of people, we're structured differently. So what works for Amazon and AWS isn't necessarily going to work for me. Fair, I take that on board, it's a really good point. So with that in mind, it's my pleasure to be able to invite Harvey Deek up onto the stage to talk us through how CBA approach solving this problem at scale within their organization. Harvey, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mitch. Thanks everyone, pleasure to be here today, and thanks to AWS for having us. My name's Harvey Deek, I am the Group CIO for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, and part of my responsibilities is leading the practice that looks after embedding security through our security engineering ways of working with our product and technology teams, amongst other diverse sets of responsibilities. So, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Awesome, thank you very much. Thanks, Harvey, really appreciate you being here today. So, I just talked about understanding the problem is a really important first step. Can you perhaps talk us through some of the challenges that CBA saw that led to creation of the Champions program?
Yeah, for us, it was like the 3 S's. The first one was speed, and one of the key tenets of our technology strategy was to create an organization primed for delivery. And you mentioned it in your introduction, Mitch, where we talked about how do we get faster? How do we anticipate needs of customers, releasing new products and features and services in a way that's meeting consumer expectations. And so that was kind of the first challenge where we started from. The second one was scale. How do you scale this out to a very, very large organization? You know, we've got thousands of applications, it's decades and decades of technology built up over time. And so being able to kind of scale your security practices and your engineering practices throughout an organization like that was one of the challenges. And then finally, and again you mentioned in your intro, skills. The scarcity of skills in the market meant we couldn't just keep, even if we had the budget and the resources to be able to keep hiring and building out that practice, because we're all competing for the same talent pool, the same set of security professionals. 3.5 million, I think, was the number, the deficit that we're facing globally, and that's no different here in Australia. And so, yeah, it was, you know, to summarize it, it was how do you go fast, scale, and maintain high security standards.
Yeah, awesome, thank you. And I mean, CBA is a 120-year-old organization. There's a lot of culture that's been there for a long time. How has the Champions program impacted, influenced the culture at CBA?
Yeah, so in terms of influence, when we started the program, we had to go and attack it as an organizational change management problem, and that was talking to the executive layer, talking to the middle management, talking to the engineers on the ground to sell the benefits of the program. In terms of integrating that into the actual bank, it just so happened at the same time we were going through our own version of a scaled agile transformation program. So embedding our newer ways of working into that was the right opportunity to be able to do that. We built our own version of a security academy to provide education and training and cultural elements. And that we integrated actually with our HR learning portal, so it was kind of a lot more seamless in the way we were delivering this to our engineers.
Awesome. You mentioned scale a couple of times as well. How has the Champions program scaled across the organization as new compliance and security challenges have emerged?
Yeah, that's a great question, because security is not something you want to try to iterate or get wrong. We're a bank, our customers and the community expect pretty high, it's high stakes, high standards. Mm-hmm. So being able to scale it, well, first of all, we built a dedicated team to actually build the program, so we recognized it wasn't something that could be done at the side of a desk for a bunch of existing security professionals. But in terms of scaling, one of the big debates we had at the start of the program was how do you distribute that ownership safely so that we retained initially a number of levels of accountability and sign-offs before we matured and saw the maturity being embedded into the different product teams. Before delegating ultimately that ownership once we saw that it could scale, because yeah, you didn't want to kind of make that mistake or iterate your way to greatness simply because security is just too high stakes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Now, I know that the bank's vision is to build the bank of tomorrow today. How has the Security Champions program at CBA helped allow the bank and enable the bank to continuously improve that customer experience?
Yeah, so what we saw through the program is, and you can see some of the stats here on the slide, but there was a 4 times increase in the speed of our cybersecurity reviews and our processes in the software and system development lifecycle, and that ultimately sped up the delivery of features and changes to our systems and products. And so that translated into 2 times more technology changes, but also quality increased. So there's been 2.5 times less incidences as we've kind of scaled this program out. So faster reviews, more change we're pushing through, more technology change we're pushing through the system, and 2.5 times fewer incidents. And pleasingly, and most importantly, the number of security issues and defects that were making their way through fell off drastically, fell off a cliff.
That's awesome, that's some great numbers there. And talking of numbers, and we mentioned measuring impact and adoption and other things as well, how are you thinking about measuring the program in terms of changing behaviors?
Yeah, so I mentioned a couple of them there, but a few measures that we really attached ourselves to was the number of champions that we had trained, and the number of those that actually contributed or completed some of these cybersecurity review assessments. So this has taken us a long time. This is, not, as you mentioned, it wasn't something that happened overnight. This is 3 to 4 years in the making, and so we're up to the point now where 70% of our security work, or just upfront kind of security review work, is being completed by champions. So, yeah, like I said, the number of champions, how much of that is being completed, and like I said before, the number of changes that we're pushing through the system, but also the number of security issues and defects, and seeing that kind of trend down. Those are the kind of 4 key measures that we built as part of the program.
Awesome. And as a people-powered solution, how are the employees feeling about the program as affecting their work experience?
Yeah, that's been one of the more pleasing parts of the program is, first of all, as individuals, adding security as a skill set to a technologist or a product owner or an engineer's, it's a powerful weapon to add to your arsenal, and so we've had a lot of positive feedback as to the development that's provided our champions to be a little bit more rounded, I suppose. And whether that's to pursue a career within security or not, I think it's just one of those kind of base level foundational skills that we see as part of being an engineer in CBA. I think also what we have found is a lot more collaboration between product teams and squads, and then the security team. Traditionally, it could be a little bit siloed, but we managed to kind of break those silos and embed security. Found like we were embedding security a lot earlier in the product design life cycle. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's great. And in terms of sharing lessons learned, because a lot of customers come here, they want to hear from other customers of AWS, what kind of lessons learned can you share from your experiences?
Yeah, a few. I think starting off by being, like really radically looking at your processes and looking at simplifying how it's done, because what's worked for someone in security, you've got to have to be conscious that you're kind of developing and training, non-security minded professionals at the start, so pragmatic, threat and risk-based approach to how you do your assessments. I think also keep adapting and keep iterating. The program itself is not going to be perfect on day one. Whether that's your education and cultural material, the adoption and the rollout of it, the artifacts that you produce, there's got to be a continuous cycle of continuous improvement, because it doesn't stop on, we've done it, hey, now this is the program now for the next few years. You've got to constantly keep tuning it, adding it, reviewing how you're delegating kind of that and distributing that ownership, I think, were some of the key lessons. And look, the one thing that I found was, and the team would sort of back me up on this, is that sometimes SMEs in the actual product teams, they understand their products better than anyone, and they can sometimes spot and identify security concerns and weaknesses better than sometimes, security professionals with many, many years of experience.
Yeah, right, okay. And the program's been running for a few years now, and it's been scaling and growing. What's worked well, and perhaps what hasn't worked so well from your experiences? Yeah,
I think the thing that's worked well is, as we've set up our education cultural program, on demand, self-paced kind of training, not hours and hours and weeks to get people going. I think then a culture of doing, hands-on, throwing people somewhat into the deep end with the right guardrails in place to kind of get them applying their knowledge that they're learning. We developed a lot of the internal collateral ourselves, and I think one of the lessons, one of the debates that we're having now is, that's great, and you're getting the skills and the benefit, but do we need to bring in some external certification or accreditation to help support that? Should people choose to kind of, move outside of the organization? Because it's one thing for us to maintain it internally, and that's allowed us to maintain it quite easily and update it and iterate it.
Yeah.
But being able to kind of give people something that they can take with them as a certification is probably something that we're reevaluating now. And I think that probably one of the lessons is that we thought at the start everyone was going to want this, crave autonomy, crave ownership. But I think like any change program, you find sometimes pockets of resistance where they've become conditioned to the traditional ways of working, or I've always had this kind of model work. And so we found that interesting to see how sometimes people pushed back on the change, even though we thought there'd be a lot of benefits if they kind of bought in.
Yeah.
And just continuing to work on that. And to your point, it doesn't happen overnight. It took us really 6 months to really get it going. Starting out with some pilot groups, and then really ramping it up. But yeah, one of those lessons is, you got to expect you will expect resistance because it's change, it's changing behaviours and changing the way we work.
Yeah, that's a typical challenge of organisational change. You've got a lot of people in the room here that might be thinking about going along this journey, might be thinking about starting their own security champions or guardians style program. What kind of tips could you give to those, perhaps if they were getting started with their own, and thinking about launching? What are the first steps, let's say, that they might want to take?
Yeah, for us, my lesson learned is you've got to identify your change agents. That's both within the areas that you want to pilot with, like within your business units and your technology teams, but also within your security team. Change from within and finding the right set of motivated security professionals who want to give this a go was really the where you would start first. And I know the team's here today, and I'm really just representing the work that the team have done, because they're the ones who kind of saw the problem and helped build it out. Without them, it wouldn't have been as successful, because just getting people who see the benefits of the change and identifying those change agents both within security and outside of it.
Yeah, right, okay. And I'm sure amongst the room here there's probably other security leaders, and if you had an opportunity to give them one piece of advice, maybe they were just starting out with this kind of program, what would that piece of advice be?
I think learn from other organisations. When we started, we spent a lot of time with AWS and other organisations, and learning around how they've rolled this out and some of the pitfalls, and so accelerating some of our program and adapting the best parts of what would work for us in the context of what our challenges are would be one. I think also understanding the problem you're trying to solve. Is it scale? Do I just not simply have the resources or the budget? Is that and is it skills or is it speed? And so really trying to pinpoint on what the burning platform that you're trying to solve, and then finding those pilot areas of your business and your technology teams to be able to pilot it with.
Yeah, great. I think that's great advice. I think there's definitely not one pattern that fits everybody, and I've spoken to a lot of organizations that have trialed these kinds of programs, but in slightly different ways. It might be seconding security people out into those teams, it might be training developers in those teams, so there are different ways, so definitely not one pattern that fits all. It's great to hear from CBA on that point. I guess the last question is, what's next? From a security leadership perspective, from group security perspective, where are you going?
Look, it wouldn't be, I felt a bit at odds because I didn't really have as much Gen AI content today, so I felt like it wouldn't be a technology conference in 2025 without dropping it in. But we've been piloting some of our own experiments around how to do and augment what either a security engineer does or a security champion does with generative AI capability. We have a partnership with AWS for our data platform. And so we've been seeing some pretty successful results in terms of using some of the new technology and generative AI technology to augment and accelerate some of these assessments. And I've been kind of blown away with how good and how accurate, and how I was a bit of a skeptic at the start, but to see some of the way that the technology can help actually reason and do what's usually between the two ears of a security professional has been pretty powerful, and we're looking forward to rolling this out en masse to the program to augment both the human side of it, but also augmenting some of our security assessments as part of scaling the program out.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Great. Awesome. Well, I click through now, and we'll move to to the end section here. So, I mean, thank you first. I think there's so many great lessons there that hopefully a lot of people in here will find great value in. And I know we'll be hanging around at the end of the session if people want to come and ask us any more questions. But just to recap, if you're thinking about building a culture of security, or a culture of security is something you're striving to achieve within your own organization, think about that executive support. We've got leaders like Harvey at CBA that have been driving that initiative as well, which has been fantastic, and I explained how we do that at Amazon and at AWS more broadly. So find those executive stakeholders that are interested in helping solve those business problems, and they're going to be able to champion this for you from the top of the organization down. Really important, but often overlooked, that concept of psychological safety. Make security normal, make the language inclusive, not as intimidating as sometimes it is. The imagery and the language that's typically associated with security can be quite scary. Make it accessible for people to log and report security issues. Make them feel comfortable with it and confident with it. Make escalation a normal part of your environment and not a thing to be feared and scared. And then finally, think about how your organization might approach distributing security ownership within your organization. It might be using a champions or a guardian style program. It might just be finding ambassadors across many different lines of business within your organization that can help form a network of security-minded individuals that will help pick up and identify potential risks and issues before they become problems for you. Harvey, thank you again. It was great to chat with you. I really appreciate you coming and spending some time with us today, and I know that everyone here values the information that you've been able to share. We're going to be around after the session if you'd like to come and speak to us. I would love it if everyone would pick out their phone right now, get the survey out and give us a good score. That would be fantastic. We'd really appreciate that. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.